Hi, my name is Daniel Cook. Welcome to the video. This video is being made for the purpose of a final project for the class Motor Learning, or SPHS 502, as part of my journey of completing a master's degree in sports and health science with an emphasis on exercise science and human performance. The focus on this video is going to be how I would teach a quote-unquote newbie on how to perform a squat by using a little emphasis on a concept known as degrees of freedom. And providing them with, feedback, external feedback from me as a coach, and trying to guide them through receiving their own internal feedback through proprioception. All right, squats are going to be the focus of the video, and that's because they're an important part of life. They're probably the best foundational movement for almost all of athletics, in my opinion. Not only are they perfectly functional in everyday life, but squats are also used in nearly all types of athletics. In this video, we will focus mostly on body squats or air squats, depending on what you call them, and barbell squats. The two types of barbell squats that will be mentioned by me in this video are probably going to be back squats and front squats. Degrees of freedom is a concept that I believe was first recognized by a Russian neurophysiologist named Nikolai Bernstein. He said that it is clear that the basic difficulties for coordination consist precisely in the extreme abundance of degrees of freedom, with which the nervous system is not at first in a position to deal with. Basically, there are unlimited ways for the same movement to be done. I think that actually Nikolai Bernstein first recognized the degrees of freedom problem when watching blacksmiths, hammer metal with their hammers. However that applies. But this unlimited way to complete the same movement through different, neurological motor patterns is part of what makes us humans, or more accurately, animals, and not robots. We don't have to all do everything the same. We are not limited by our range of motion, or we're not limited in our range of motion, and how we execute the task. And we can consciously control our bodies and teach our bodies new ways to improve the movement. Doing a squat is one of the most natural movements that a human can do. We can squat down to pick something up, we can squat down to talk to a child, or we can do a partial squat right before we jump. And I've even read that the squat is a natural way that the humans are actually supposed to go to the bathroom, and I've witnessed this myself in Afghanistan, but that's a story for another day. In the end, in sports and in real life, applications for the squat are absolutely endless. Understanding motor control and teaching proper technique is important for any coach. As a coach, you need to be able to teach a young or novice athlete, or athletes in general, how to perform the squat. And one way you can do this is to guide a novice or a young athlete, to have better technique, is by using the concept of degrees of freedom and applying that into your coaching methods. There isn't simply a single way or a single motor pattern to do a squat, or a single technique to do a squat, or any movement pattern for that matter. Because, again, we're not robots. All the different ways or motor patterns that the body has to choose from when doing a movement are called degrees of freedom. Since the body has such an unlimited amount of motor patterns to complete any given task, I apply the concepts of degrees of freedom into the way I teach the sequencing of a squat. It simplifies the complexity in the movement and quote-unquote freezes some degrees of freedom and decreases the amount of movement options that are available. To do this, I provide the athlete with specific cues that take away from the variations of movements that may take place when performing the squat, and hopefully increase the neurological efficiency of the movement itself and reduces the risk of injuries. The cues that I provide, that I'll go over here in a minute, can be used as a sort of mental checklist. It's the mental checklist that I use when performing squats, and can be used by the athlete, and not only like a step-by-step instruction type thing, but they can also be used to help guide a young athlete through receiving internal feedback through that proprioception. The athlete's proprioception will tell them whether the squat technique feels good to them or hurts them or whatnot. When the athlete is new to the movement altogether, they will primarily have to rely on the external feedback of the coach. The coach will provide performance feedback to the athlete, and to the athlete, like either during the movement or after the movement is complete. The athlete takes that external feedback, applies it to the next lift, hopefully, and then as they get more experience, they can kind of receive that, they can start to receive that internal proprioceptive, internal, being repetitive, that internal feedback through proprioception, what feels good and whether they think the athlete, they were leaning too far forward or whatnot. If the squat looks, for me, when I'm coaching somebody in the squat, if the squat looks technically good to me and I provide them with that positive reinforcement by telling them that they achieved the goal of performing a technically correct barbell back squat, then I usually ask them how it felt so that I can kind of guide the athlete into jump-starting their proprioceptive internal feedback. Once they become a little bit more experienced with the movement, then they'll be able to notice when they are leaning like a little too far forward in the squat, or whether they want to like adjust the hand position on the bars, like a wide grip, hand position, or more, narrow grip, whether they want to do thumbs around the bar or thumbs over the bar. Whatever they think just feels a little bit weird and makes them more comfortable in the lift in general. Also, as the athlete gets a little bit more experienced, their bodies will explore more options and the central nervous system will, quote unquote, unfreeze some of the degrees of freedom or perform them more naturally, and the squat will just look and feel more natural and fluid. Once the athlete gets to the point where this is happening, the learning isn't done there. The body will continuously keep looking for ways to improve the movement, and in other words, the athlete should never stop working to improve technique. On a side note, this is why I always encourage fellow athletes to perform every repetition as if they had a heavy load on the bar. And by doing this, that neural pathway continuously gets reinforced, and when you have to have a heavy load on the bar, or when you're at a competition meet and you're going for that PR on your third attempt, your body will be more ready for it. The body is using all of those repetitions to continue to learn an even more efficient way to perform the task and improve the technical proficiency in the lift itself. I might encourage a low bar / hips back type approach to the back squat, but I also encourage athletes to try adding in, slightly different variables every now and then. So, such as like a narrower foot stance or changing the foot position from like a railroad track type foot position where the toes are pointing straight forward to maybe a little bit slightly out. Whatever it is, changing their hand position, but all of this is an effort to widen the athlete's schema in their central nervous system, or that their central nervous system has for squats in general or squat-like movements in real life. Building a wider schema will assist with the skill transference in more sport-specific tasks, like, ball sports, any type of ball sport. But unless you or the athlete just solely competes in strength sports like powerlifting, strongman, or whatever, Olympic lifting, then having as wide of a schema as possible is probably going to be a good thing. I also encourage athletes to train movements heavy, not necessarily max out all the time, but generally heavy, where they're using like a max rep range of 3 to 6 or 5 to 7, 5 to 10 reps, depending on what their goals are. 3 to 6 for more strength specific training, or maybe 5 to 10 for heavy hypertrophy training. Hypertrophy being building muscle size. Training at these heavy loads and technical lifts is a good thing because training heavy punishes technical inefficiency. And by technical lifts, I do include the squat in that. I don't just follow the bandwagon and say that the snatch or the clean and jerk is a technical lift, because to a beginner who's never had to experience the motor pattern of squatting with weight on their back, the squat is very technical lift. There's a lot to it. It's not just sit down, stand up. But if you don't have your technique dialed in when you go to lift a max or near max lift, then you're going to find out. This proprioceptive internal feedback that you're going to get when you go to perform a squat with less than perfect technical proficiency in the squat is going to benefit you in the long run, because I didn't get the lift because I felt like I was leaning too far forwards. And now I know to have my weight on my whole foot, or the center of my foot, however you want to think about it. But this proprioceptive internal feedback will benefit the athlete and allow them to better practice that proper technique at lighter loads, which will, again, in the long run, improve the performance when under heavy loads. if the athlete does not practice that proper technique at all weights, as if they were lifting heavy, then it could be catastrophic. By catastrophic, I mean missing the lift. It could be catastrophic when they go for a personal record or if they're at a competition and trying to win or trying to be competitive. The neural pathway just simply isn't driven in as much as it could be when they go for their big lift. When they do that, their body could, maybe unless you're like a freak of nature, just like that natural athlete, their body could freeze some of the degrees of freedom. And by that, I mean their body does something just a little bit more different than it normally does when they were in training with that submaximal load. And then the athlete misses the lift, which to me would be catastrophic in competition. Having only ever really trained with submaximal loads, the athlete's movement pattern may deviate under a maximal load because their lack of neural pathway efficiency just simply isn't strong enough to, for them to fight through that tough part in that heavy big lift. All right, so onto the squat. Let me reposition my camera right here so you can have a whole, like a wider view, a better view. So when I teach a squat, this isn't everything. This is just generally how I would teach a squat and like the tips that I usually repetitively give, fellow athletes. So they walk up to the bar, they place their hands, wherever they feel comfortable, whether that's going to be wide or, right here. I always have my thumbs on the end of the knurl on the barbell, and then I place my feet right under the bar, basically shoulder width height or shoulder width apart, where I'm going to be picking up the bar. I usually go for right above my shoulder bone, kind of on the back of my traps. Usually I'm going to step back, but for the purpose of this video, I'll step forward for the squat. My feet, for me, are going to be a little bit wider than shoulder width apart, probably what is more known as a powerlifting squat. My wrists are going to be straight. I have a thumbless grip. I have my elbows are going to be pushed a little bit forward. I'm not just having them back here all loosey-goosey. They push forward. For me, that's going to help my, maintaining my posture. Before I go to actually perform the squat, before I go down, what I do is I brace my core. By bracing my core, I mean I'm going to tighten my abdominal muscles by bringing my belly button as close to my spine as possible. Then I'll breathe in and hold my breath. Also, at the same time, my toes are pointed generally straight forward with a little bit of deviation to the outside, and I'm going to place my heel, my pinky, and my big toe down, and then I'm going to apply torque by rotating both my feet to the outside just a little bit. That applies that torque through my legs and allows me to lift heavier. After I have that torque applied, I'm bracing my core, suck in, breathe, and then I go down, maintaining that torque through my legs, as far as possible. When I start to go down, I always break at the hips first. So that degrees of freedom that I was talking about, I'm gonna break at the hips first, not just start bending at the knees. So hips first, and part of the sequencing then goes start bending at the knees. The hips back, then start bending knees and sit down until the crease of my hips are around the tops of my knees. Then I'm going to come back up. Generally, I also teach to have my head and neck in line with my spine, and kind of like a baseball, holding a baseball right here. I have them pretend to hold a baseball the whole time. So that way, when they go down, they're not, I feel like breaking their neck to look up at the, just like the old school football players would tell their athletes to look up at the corner, to look up at the ceiling. To me, that's crazy. Head and neck in line with the spine. I feel like it's more stable. Let's see. That's pretty much it. There's a little bit more to it, but those are generally the tips and the cues that I give the athletes. Hands on the bar, wherever it feels comfortable. Get under the bar, place your feet, apply that torque in your legs, rotating your feet outward, or not actually doing it, but heel, pinky, and big toe down, and act like you're ripping a piece of paper in half. But with your feet on the floor, not actually moving. That torque goes to your legs, allows more neural drive to your legs. Bracing your core allows your central nervous system to be able to apply more neural drive to the legs, and actually you get to experience, how strong your legs actually are, because your body, your central nervous system isn't worried about your core collapsing in. That's pretty much it for the video. Thank you.